This is the 42-inch LG C2 OLED. Let's go into the user menu and see if there's anything new. So if I long press the settings button on the remote control, you can see that I've pre-selected filmmaker mode. And if we go into advanced settings, there are 3 submenus just like last year. And under the brightness submenu, you can see that I've lowered the OLED pixel brightness to 20 so as to avoid the picture blowing out on camera. And then you get adjust contrast as well. And I think there has been a change in terms of the labeling from last year to this year when it comes to this black level control. Obviously, this control allows you to set the video black level, and it is now correctly labeled as black level, whereas last year I think the label was screen brightness, which is probably more obscure and incorrect technically. So well done to LG for using the correct terminology. And then auto dynamic contrast will just apply an S-shaped gamma. Normally for an accurate image, we try to turn this off. And then with the peak brightness control, this will determine the amount of white subpixel boosting. And it is necessary to increase it to high for HDR content. And with gamma, this is basically a transfer function. In SDR, it should be BT1886. In HDR, it would be grayed out at 2.2. And then again, another correct terminology that has been used on 2022 TVs will be the video range control. I think, last year, the label that was used was black level, but video range is technically more correct. And because I'm not actually feeding any input video signal to the TV, it is grayed out at the moment. And if we get out from the brightness submenu and go into the color submenu, color depth will increase or decrease the saturation and also the luminance of all the colors on a global basis. Tint will rotate all the colors. Color gamut auto detect is generally the most accurate, which means that the television will try to detect the incoming info frame from the video signal and then apply the appropriate or the correct color gamut, color space. So for HDTV content, it should be BT709, whereas for UHD content, it should be REC 2020. And then under fine-tune, this is LG's color management system or CMS. And if you actually turn color adjustment to user selection, then you will be able to calibrate the 3 primary colors of red, green, and blue, and the 3 secondary colors of cyan, magenta, and yellow. And in terms of the parameters that you can adjust for each color, you can adjust the saturation, the tint, and also the luminance. So this is an HSL color management system. And if we go into the white balance submenu, the color temperature by default in filmmaker mode is 150, which is targeting the D6FI white point, which is the white point that is used within the film and broadcast industry. So if you want the most accurate color temperature out of the box, you should use filmmaker mode and also correspondingly 150. And you can adjust or calibrate the white balance using the 2-point controls, the 10-point controls, or the 22-point controls. And generally what we do on an OLED TV is to use the high controls to adjust the brighter portion of the grayscale and then use the 22-point controls to zone in and do a more precise calibration at each interval. And then what we will do is to go into the next submenu, which is clarity, and adjust sharpness. By default, it is 10. I would normally try to lower it all the way to 0 for neutral sharpening regardless of the content. And super resolution again is another form of edge enhancement. In filmmaker mode, it is normally off, which is correct. Noise reduction, impact noise reduction, and smoke gradation are all still present. And if I actually go there and Real Cinema, again, because I haven't fed any video signal to this 42-inch LG C2, Real Cinema is grayed out, but I think last year it is labeled as cinema screen. This year they have reverted to Real Cinema, and Real Cinema will perform 2 functions. One is film mode deinterlacing and the other one is 5.5 pull down. So if you want accurate panning shots without telescopic judder in 24p films, you need to turn Real Cinema on. And if we go into the True Motion submenu, you can see that cinematic movement remains in place. I think this is one of the major advances that LG has introduced last year. It provides judicious smoothing of 24p content without getting into obvious soap opera effect territory. And then natural and smooth movements will just increase the intensity. And with these settings, the SOE effect will be much more obvious and quite off-putting to any videophile like myself. And then if we go into the user selection submenu, you can see two separate controls, De-Judder and also De-Blur. De-Judder will affect low frame rate content. By low frame rate content, I mean 24p or 30p content. And this will increase the amount of motion interpolation for this low frame rate content to reduce the amount of stutter. Whereas the blur will be applied to higher frame rate content, 50p or 60p, to increase the motion resolution or reduce the motion blur. And I noticed that, under OLED Motion, there is no longer OLED Motion Pro. If you remember last year and maybe the year before on the CX or C10 series, you get OLED Motion Pro where you get 120 Hz black frame insertion or 120 Hz BFI, which allows you to select the intensity of the black frames that are inserted into the picture. But for 2022, I think there has been a slight regression in this area because the OLED Motion is only an on-off toggle, and I will need to investigate whether this makes its way onto a production set when I review these TVs. And if we get out from here, and I'll just briefly go into the general submenu and show you some of the OLED Care settings. This video is sponsored by Box, the online technology store. Visit box.co.uk for the best deals on TVs, soundbars, and all your other technology needs. Under device self-care, it is important for you when you first get the TV to go into this energy saving submenu and disable energy saving step. I have done so before I actually turned on the camera and started filming this video. But this is important to reduce the amount of dimming or the peak brightness cap that is caused by the light sensor on the television detecting ambient lighting in the room. And otherwise, if we go into OLED panel care, all the regular anti-screen burn measures are still present. You get pixel cleaning, which will start a major compensation cycle. With screen move, this will move the pixels on screen in a very slight manner to reduce the risk of image retention and also permanent screen burn, and then adjust logo brightness will detect static elements on screen and then try to dim them down again to reduce the risk of burn-in. And while at LG UK's Weybridge office, I also had the opportunity to cast eye on comparisons between the LG C2 and last year's C1, as well as the C2 versus the step-up LG G2. So please click here to watch the video.